characters are the reasons we invest ourselves in stories. Sometimes our love for a character is wrapped up in seeing ourselves in them. In other instances, a character stands for or embodies something we are wholly against, and we want nothing more than to see them fail. But regardless of why you find yourself enthralled with the character, there is usually no greater moment of investment than when that character faces death. Everything they do, everything they say, everything they represent is heightened because, after all, that's it. The best fictional deaths say something about the character that dies. Death in storytelling is the ultimate characterization tool because when used genuinely, it creates a situation where the character is their truest self, where the ideas and symbolism that character embodies are perfectly encapsulated for the audience. By definition, when a character is given a true death, a death that persists for the rest of the fiction, their character is complete. They can no longer undergo changes to make themselves better or regress to a lesser version of themselves. When a character dies, we are given the full picture of what the creator wanted that character to represent, because what we are left with is all that character will ever be. Those last few moments that a character is around are powerful too. They become stuck in our heads. I imagine if I said the phrase Darth Vader's death scene, you could picture it all on your own. The same would probably ring true for Mufasa's death scene. And besides having the dulcet godlike voice of James Earl Jones behind them, both of these characters have something in common. They are a great example of the recency bias, a psychological phenomenon where a person most easily remembers something that has happened recently, compared to remembering something that may have occurred a while back. The final scenes we spend with a character have the potential to be self-seared into our memories, so it's paramount that anyone out there who wants to write know how to most effectively utilize a death scene. Now, I'm not saying that all death scenes are the same, because they aren't, nor am I saying that all deaths need to be constructed similarly, but there are general principles that one can follow to produce a character death that really sticks with their audience. First and foremost, as I have already mentioned, the best character deaths encapsulate the character's identity. In A Quiet Place, John Krasinski's character Lee Abbott died protecting his children. Ned Stark died because of his refusal to forgo his honor for his own personal benefit or safety. General Zhao chose death instead of accepting help from his enemy. Again, the best deaths speak to the character and what they represent. So let's take a look at what Sarah Lynn represented. By the third season of the show, she was a sexually promiscuous, drug-addicted pop star who had already been taken to rehab by Bojack once. But of course, she wasn't always like this. The earliest we see of Sarah Lynn is her on Horsin' Around, where she played Bojack's youngest daughter, Sabrina. From here, we can get a picture of the innocence she once had, that, if not outright destroyed, at least faded away. With all this in mind, it would be easy to say that Sarah Lynn could be inspired by any number of real-world celebrities who have walked down a similarly difficult path. Amanda Bynes encountered drug addiction after her television fame at a young age, just like Sarah Lynn. Bojack Horseman's composer, Jesse Novak, stated that the sound of Sarah Lynn's first hit, Prickly Muffin, was his take on a stylistic cross between hit singles Toxic and Slave for You, both sung by Britney Spears. The rehab center that Sarah Lynn goes to, called Promises Rehab, is the same one that Lindsay Lohan attended in reality. But to define Sarah Lynn to one specific person wouldn't do justice to her character. Rather, she seems to be a commentary on the entertainment industry as a whole and its effects on children, especially girls. In season 2, Sarah Lynn comments that she knows what bear fur tastes like, which may seem like an innocuous detail in the moment, but becomes much more sinister later on. We learn that her stepfather is a bear who works as a photographer, one that has a striking resemblance to Terry Richardson, a real-world fashion photographer who is currently under investigation for numerous alleged sexual assaults. And the show's portrayal of Sarah Lynn's mother is no better. She was shown to be obsessed with making Sarah Lynn into an actress, going to extremes to make it a reality, and shutting down any of Sarah Lynn's other interests in the process. Listen to an exchange they shared in season 1.
Honey, college is for ugly people who can't tap dance.
But I want to be an architect.
Sweetheart, Mommy didn't do what Mommy did to that Star Search producer so that you could be an architect.
Unlike Bojack, who ran to television and acting as a means to cope with his dysfunctional family, Sarah Lynn was forced into that lifestyle. Her continued hidden passion for architecture is shown subtly throughout the show. In the episode That's Too Much Man, she comments on a playground needing parallel joints. When Bojack takes her to a planetarium, she reveals she's interested in the fact that the building is a dome. And to truly drive home the point, her final words were, "I want to be an architect." And this representation isn't lost on Sarah Lynn either, who gives a poignant breakdown of where being forced into a life of fame has taken her emotionally. Sarah Lynn tells Bojack,
Bojack, I don't like anything about me. None of this is me. These boobs aren't me. This house isn't me. The only reason I wear this shirt is because some company paid me $8,000 to wear it. And I don't even need the money. I just liked that someone still wanted me to wear their shirt.
Sarah Lynn simultaneously represents a parody and a jarringly honest depiction of the effect that the entertainment industry has on children and the eventual adults they become. The reason why Sarah Lynn's death was impactful is because it was the final outcome, the summation of what her character represented. It hits hard because we, as the audience, know all too well that Sarah Lynn's story is far more fact than fiction. Amy Winehouse, Heath Ledger, Jimi Hendrix, and Kurt Cobain all died from drug-related incidents after their rise to fame, and they were all younger than Sarah Lynn. Her death signified a message about the Hollywood life that she lived and how it figuratively killed her innocence, and then quite literally killed her. But even deaths with a meaning behind them can lose much of their emotional impact if not properly built up. Just like in real life, there is a tension that comes with death. Effective foreshadowing can accomplish much of this. In Breaking Bad, Gus kills his assistant Victor with a box cutter. In the beginning of that episode, before the title card, the box cutter is zoomed in on by the camera. In Hereditary, the symbol of payment is carved into the pole that takes off Charlie's head. In Game of Thrones, Tywin is skinning a dead deer with his bare hands, a deer being the sigil of King Robert and his family, who all end up dead. With this in mind, we can look at what factors were used to lay the groundwork for Sarah Lynn's death. Well, in Season 1, her Prickly Muffin music video is filmed in the same planetarium her final moments take place in. In Season 2, at Herb's funeral, the cast of Horsing Around jokes about which of them will die next. In the same exchange, Sarah Lynn is the only one that doesn't predict Bojack will die next. Instead, she states, "I'm so high, I don't know where I am." And in That's Too Much Man, the episode where her death actually occurs, the first image we see is a portrait of a drowned Ophelia, except Sarah Lynn is dead in Ophelia's place. When speaking about such foreshadowing, show creator Raphael Bob Waxberg has said, Sarah Lynn's death is pretty clearly telegraphed. We're not trying to surprise you with it necessarily, although I'm sure some people will be surprised. It's more playing with the idea that you know what's coming, and you don't want it to. The last sentence about not wanting a surprise, but for the audience to know something might be coming, creates that suspense that comes along with character death. The best deaths are those that are not certain, not implausible, but just viable enough to keep you invested in that character. But most importantly, the best deaths have consequences for the story and the characters. In Red Dead Redemption 1, John Marston dies and Jack Marston goes on a years-long manhunt to avenge him. In Gurren Lagann, when Kamina dies, Simone takes up his ideals. In Death Note, when L dies, Light takes over the world, completely changing the show. While your consequences don't have to be so dire or drastic, they do need to create a noticeable change in the story. So what changes because of Sarah Lynn's death? In short, Bojack does. It causes him to introspect about the person he has become and how he affects those close to him. Regarding consequences, Wax has said, that is absolutely what the show is about. It's about consequences, and it's about actions having an effect on others and the world around you, and on yourself. When speaking with the animation team, Wax told them that if Bojack has a big party and his house gets messed up, keep his house messed up for the next episode. Don't clean it up and start over. His mindset is, even if we don't address it in the script, the default is that things stay damaged. And the damage that Sarah Lynn's death deals is represented this way immediately. She no longer appears in the intro sequence anymore. And when considering the changes in universe, Bojack has to grapple with the consequences of what has occurred. After Sarah Lynn's funeral, Bojack says,
"The funeral was huge. There were so many people there. I kept thinking, I did this to her. And everyone was just standing around like, well, this is bound to happen, but it wasn't bound to happen. I don't know how to be, Diane. It doesn't get better and it doesn't get easier. I can't keep lying to myself, saying I'm gonna change. I'm poison.
Bojack.
I come from poison. I have poison inside me, and I destroy everything I touch. That's my legacy. I have nothing to show for the life that I've lived, and I have nobody in my life who's better off for having known me."
Bojack recognizes that the bender he and Sarah Lynn went on was his idea, and that it shouldn't have happened. Bojack understands that he was the closest thing to a father figure in Sarah Lynn's life, and despite that, she ended up dead from overdosing on a brand of heroin called Bojack. In Sarah Lynn, Bojack saw himself, a person that went through the trials and terrors of fame, a person that he could confide in, and a reflection of himself. He even tells her this.
You know, sometimes it feels like you're the only one who really understands me, because how could anyone else?
Nobody knows what we went through. Nobody who wasn't on that show.
But we knew each other before we were anybody, and that's how we can be friends, because we're not like those other people.
If Sarah Lynn couldn't survive the life she was living, and she and Bojack are so closely tied, Bojack must wrestle with what that must mean for him. While Sarah Lynn is a representation of how fame and recognition might negatively impact a child, Bojack is that same representation, but for an adult. The consequences of Sarah Lynn's death directly reflect on and impact him. When asked about Bojack's relation to Sarah Lynn dying, Wax has said, "Ultimately, if the show is a story about Bojack's redemption, and I'm not sure it is, I feel like before he starts his climb back up, he needs to hit rock bottom." A lot of people felt like the end of season 2 was his rock bottom, but I feel like no, he could fall more. That excites me about working on the show, the idea that we are moving forward, we are tearing things apart that we can never put back together, which feels very true, and also scary as a writer. The fear that Wax feels is a healthy fear. It is a sign to a writer that the deaths in their story carry weight and a message. Sarah Lynn's death managed to encapsulate her character identity, was foreshadowed for seasons, and created a consequence that rocked our protagonist to his very core. At the end of the day, all a writer can hope to do with the harshness of death is use it to touch their audience on a personal level, with a character whose life amounted to a message well received.